Mary Pinchot Meyer was born on October 14, 1920, into a milieu of comfort and intellectual pedigree that would shape her as an adult, though few could have guessed just how deeply her pursuits and associations would impact the American political tapestry. Her father, Amos Pinchot, descended from a family of progressive reformers and championed progressive causes, while her mother, Ruth, was a writer with a penchant for the arts. The Pinchot name carried weight. Mary's paternal uncle Gifford Pinchot had served as the first chief of the United States Forest Service and later became governor of Pennsylvania. From the start, Mary was nurtured in a climate that valued both activism and creativity, absorbing her father's political ideals and her mother's refined artistic sensibilities. This blend of influence gave her a unique vantage. She was raised to believe her intellect was every bit as vital as her social connections. Even in childhood, Mary demonstrated an original spark. While other children might have busied themselves with dolls or board games, Mary was inclined to wander her parents' estate, enthralled by the patterns of sunlight through leaves and the textures of bark. She had a visual acuity that would later translate into her interest in painting, but at the time, it simply set her apart as a dreamer, though no one mistook her daydreaming for laziness. Her teachers noted her sharp wit and her eagerness to ask questions that probed beyond the safe frontiers of the curriculum. She seemed to thrive on contradiction, at once intensely social and yet comfortable in solitary pursuits. She would take part in lively gatherings her parents hosted, debates with visiting politicians, philosophers, or intellectuals, before slipping out to sketch a still life or scribble reflections in a notebook. Mary's adolescence was enriched by the conversation and debate that swirled through her family home. The Pinchots supported progressive causes that some would have deemed radical at the time: women's rights, government reform, environmental preservation. Mary soaked it all in, developing an independent streak that refused easy categorization. She attended prestigious schools, including Brearley in Manhattan, where she excelled not just academically, but also socially, forging early friendships with peers who would later become artists, writers, or influential figures in their own right. Her striking looks, tall, lean, with penetrating eyes, only amplified the impression she made. She had a magnetism that invited both curiosity and admiration. Yet she carried it casually, seemingly unaware of the effect she had on others or disinclined to exploit it. After high school, Mary ventured to Vassar College, one of the 7 sister schools that fostered a strong tradition of female intellectual empowerment. There, she studied art and political science, capturing aspects of both her mother's and father's worlds. While at Vassar, she refined her painting technique, studying the European masters yet evolving her own style that leaned toward vibrant colors and freeform expression. She took courses in world history and political theory, continuing to shape the progressive spirit that had taken root in her family home. It was at Vassar that she began to sense the potential for art and activism to converge. In the post-Depression, pre-World War II atmosphere, many of her peers were content to discuss the era's political complexities only in passing. Mary, however, saw a continuum. People's emotional landscapes could be shifted, even awakened, by the power of creative expression. She believed that painting was more than an aesthetic pastime. It was a way to interpret, critique, and perhaps even shift cultural currents. Upon graduation, Mary's path led her briefly into journalism, working for a small publication in New York. She liked writing but found it less immersive than painting. Words felt too linear for her swirling imagination. Yet the journalist's sense of inquiry stuck. She would remain an acute observer of institutions and personalities throughout her life, often taking note of subtext where others perceived only surface detail. For Mary, the personal was always political, and the aesthetic intertwined with the civic. By her mid-20s, she encountered Cord Meyer, a highly decorated Marine veteran who had lost an eye in the Pacific during World War II. Cord was as intellectually driven as Mary, and he was equally sure that the post-war world demanded a bold new approach to foreign policy and peace activism. Handsome, articulate, and brimming with a fervor for shaping the international order, Cord drew Mary's attention immediately. She admired his sharp mind and moral convictions. He, in turn, was captivated by her ability to merge artistry with a nuanced understanding of global affairs. They married in 1945, and in the immediate aftermath of the war, the couple embarked on a path that seemed destined for grand endeavors. Initially, Cord was involved in founding the United World Federalists, advocating for stronger international governance to prevent future wars. Mary followed him across the country, engaging in activism and refining her painting in stolen hours. The marriage looked ideal from the outside, two bright, charismatic souls determined to push for progressive reform. Yet as time wore on, Cord's trajectory led him to align with the CIA, a stark turn from his earlier pacifist activism. For Mary, the shift was jarring. She had committed to a partner who championed global unity and peace, only to see him pivot to clandestine intelligence work that advanced American interests in ways she found morally problematic. The tension between her ideals and Cord's new career gnawed at her sense of harmony. Still, she tried to remain supportive, balancing the life of a mother. She and Cord had 3 sons, and that of an artist seeking her own voice. Their family eventually settled in the Washington, D.C. area, where Cord's CIA ties placed them in proximity to power players in government and foreign affairs. They moved easily through the capital's social sphere, rubbing elbows with senators, lobbyists, diplomats, and intelligence operatives, all the while carrying an air of sophistication. Mary's painting often took a back seat, overshadowed by social obligations and the raising of her children. The discrepancy between Mary's pacifist leanings and Cord's deepening role in intelligence created strains that were not easily mended. By the mid-1950s, their marriage was in trouble. Mary had begun to question the entire apparatus of Cold War politics. She saw behind the polished facade of parties and dinners, suspecting that fear was fueling an increasingly militarized approach to foreign policy. Meanwhile, her own spirit yearned for genuine exploration of art, of consciousness, of a freer mode of being than the CIA Wives Club typically allowed. In 1958, she and Cord divorced, a decision that carried scandalous undertones in Washington's conservative social circles. Still, Mary was determined to plot her own course, though it meant forging a future without the protective framework of a conventional marriage to a rising star in government. Having regained her independence, Mary immersed herself in painting and gradually embedded herself in a network of avant-garde artists, intellectuals, and bohemians. Through these connections, she also befriended Timothy Leary, the Harvard psychologist whose experiments with psychedelic substances, especially LSD, would soon capture national attention. Mary's curiosity about states of consciousness and alternative ways of understanding reality meshed with her creative impulses. She saw parallels between LSD's potential for transcendent experience and the expressive freedom she found in modern art. Despite the hush-hush nature of such experimentation in polite society, Mary explored these territories with a sense of intellectual rigor, not merely as a recreational spree. During this period, Mary's path crossed again with John F. Kennedy, whom she had known socially through the Georgetown set. JFK had ascended to the presidency, and his marriage to Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy was globally celebrated. Yet Washington was awash with rumors that he maintained discreet relationships outside his marriage. By most accounts, Mary and JFK's connection went beyond mere dalliance. Their affair, as it was whispered in certain circles, involved discussions of politics, art, and the possibility of new frontiers in global cooperation. Some even suggest Mary introduced the president to the idea of exploring altered states of consciousness as a means of expanding empathy or creativity in governance, though hard evidence remains elusive. What is clear is that Mary held JFK's attention in a way few did. She was neither intimidated by his position nor bedazzled by the pomp that surrounded him. Instead, she posed challenging questions, offered unconventional perspectives, and carried herself with the composure of someone for whom status was incidental, not defining. In the early 1960s, Mary settled into a life that was an odd fusion of the Bohemian and the Beltway. She had a studio in Georgetown where she worked on large canvases, mixing elements of abstraction and figurative hints that gestured at deeper emotional or spiritual realities. She hosted small salons that drew together a curious mix: CIA operatives, journalists, artists, old family friends from liberal activist circles, and occasional visits from figures in the Kennedy administration. Observers might have found it incongruous, a place where LSD experiments and high-level policy debates coexisted. But for Mary, it was precisely in these collisions that sparks of genuine insight emerged. She continued to hone her painting style, layering color in ways that spoke to her ongoing exploration of consciousness. She had also taken to journaling regularly, keeping meticulous notes about her experiences, her personal revelations, and, some say, her interactions with powerful figures. When President Kennedy was assassinated on November 22, 1963, Mary was devastated. She withdrew from much of the social scene, mourning not just the loss of a friend and lover, but also the abrupt end of what she saw as an era of potential renewal. The tragedy confirmed her suspicions that the corridors of power were fraught with hidden dangers, manipulations, and profound darkness. While many in Washington moved through the formal rituals of mourning, Mary wrestled with a deeper existential dread. She confided in a handful of close friends that she feared the official narrative might conceal deeper truths. She grew more guarded, focusing intently on her art and the sense that she needed to protect her privacy in ways she had not previously considered. Though she carried on with her painting, the year following the assassination brought her a restless sense that she was on borrowed time. Friends would later recall that Mary seemed almost preoccupied with unspoken concerns. She kept up her exercise routine, regularly walking along the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal towpath in Georgetown, often alone as she prized those solitary moments for reflection and clarity. She also traveled, visiting old friends and retreating to places where she could paint quietly without the intrusions of Washington gossip. Yet she never fully detached from the capital's orbit. She remained a recognized figure at certain gatherings, striking in her simple yet chic sense of style, her direct gaze, and her thoughtful conversation that bridged art theory, spiritual inquiry, and political critique. On October 12, 1964, Mary set out for her usual walk along the C&O Canal towpath. She was never seen alive again. Later that day, her body was found. She had been shot twice, once in the back of the head and once in the chest. Her sudden, violent death rattled Washington, though immediate press coverage was surprisingly muted. Within days, the police arrested a man named Raymond Crump, an African-American day laborer found in the vicinity. The evidence against him was largely circumstantial. He had no apparent motive, and the prosecution's case ultimately unraveled for lack of any concrete proof linking him to the crime. He was acquitted at trial, leaving the mystery of Mary Pinchot Meyer's murder unsolved and seeding a tangle of conspiracy theories that range from plausible to wildly speculative. In the years following her murder, those who had known Mary remembered her in strikingly similar terms: luminous, inquisitive, deeply principled, and fearless in her willingness to challenge authority. Art world acquaintances praised her talent and lamented that she had never fully gained the recognition her work deserved. Politically connected friends wondered whether she had seen too much or asked too many questions, inadvertently putting herself in danger. Conspiratorial whispers swirled. Was her murder a random street crime or a carefully orchestrated silencing? Mary's own family sought closure, but found little solace in official explanations. She had been someone who seemed to carry the secret currents of the 1960s in her slim figure, a woman navigating the intersection of politics, art, mysticism, and power at a time when those forces clashed more dramatically than ever. Timothy Leary claimed Mary had visited him after JFK's assassination, evidently troubled about the future of democracy and searching for answers. He later wrote that Mary had told him about her plan to turn on powerful figures in Washington to LSD, hoping that expanded consciousness might break the cycle of paranoia fueling Cold War policies. Whether these accounts are literal truth or tinted by Leary's flamboyance is open to debate. Still, it highlights the radical dimension of Mary's worldview. She wasn't content simply to observe or lament. She aimed to transform. That ambition, in the crucible of 1960s power, politics, may well have placed her in peril. Despite the swirl of speculation, the official record on Mary's murder remains inconclusive. Some believe her ties to the CIA through her ex-husband, coupled with her rumored attempts to influence JFK's thinking, made her a liability to entrenched interests. Others see her death as the result of random violence, albeit an especially tragic instance. Those who have seen her surviving canvases describe them as bursts of color and shape that suggest the interplay of structure and fluidity, balanced by a sensitivity to nature's quiet order. She rarely titled her works, preferring viewers to experience them without verbal preconceptions. Some recall pieces in which silhouettes of figures appear on swirling backgrounds, as though to represent consciousness afloat in a sea of possibility. A few works incorporate geometric lines that echo mid-century modernist trends, but Mary's personal palette, influenced by her LSD experiences, some suspect, lent a vibrancy that can't be easily pinned to one school of painting. If there is a single lesson in Mary's trajectory, it might be that the pursuit of personal freedom and societal change is rarely a benign endeavor in a world stacked with entrenched power. She refused to accept the default scripts available to women of her standing: docile CIA wife, decorative Georgetown hostess, without layering them with her own radical sense of agency. In painting, she sought to transcend the static lines of representation. In politics, she sought to bring new ways of thinking to the fore, even if that meant challenging the assumptions of presidents. And in her personal relationships, she navigated a labyrinth of secrecy and desire in a city that thrived on both. Today, the site of Mary's death near the C&O Canal towpath is a silent place, a walkway frequented by joggers, dog walkers, and commuters on bicycles. Few who pass by each day realize they tread on ground once marked by one of Washington's most haunting, unsolved murders. Occasionally, a historian or conspiracy buff will visit, Imagining how events unfolded on that autumn day in 1964, Mary alone in her final moments, the sound of gunshots startling birds and echoing off water, they might remember her as an artist, a mother, an influencer of presidents, or a potential CIA target. The unanswered questions about Mary's murder remain entangled in broader questions about the 1960s, the extent of CIA covert operations, the nuances of Kennedy's presidency, the cultural revolution spurred by psychedelics. She occupies a liminal state in American memory, part fact, part myth. Her name invoked whenever the conversation turns to assassinations and government cover-ups, or to the role of LSD in shaping the decade's radical ethos. Yet to reduce her to an emblem is to overlook the fullness of her humanity. She was a woman of warmth and keen intelligence, capable of forging close bonds with friends from all walks of life, loyal to her children, and steadfast in her belief that creativity and consciousness could spark societal transformation. In remembering Mary Pinchot Meyer, we can hold on to the image of a woman walking that towpath in Georgetown, stepping briskly amid the vivid autumn leaves, her mind alive with possibilities, artistic, political, spiritual. She was forging her own path in the literal sense, away from the stifling constraints of protected enclaves, searching for a truth that might, in its own way, set her and her peers free. She may have known the risks of following that path, or she may have been blind to them until it was too late. Either way, she pressed forward, guided by the same independent spirit that defined her from childhood. Though her life was cut short, her lingering presence in the American imagination is a testament to the potency of individuality, especially when it stands at odds with a culture that demands conformity. She remains in that sense an enduring figure of fascination and sorrow, luminous, idealistic, and ultimately caught in the crosswinds of an era that devoured its visionaries as readily as it celebrated them.